Our WhatsApp number is 0809 That's 0809 Send messages through Twitter with the hashtag freshly pressed. Send it to at freshly pressed 91 at smooth 91 FM on Twitter. We're streaming live on YouTube. If you haven't found us yet, well, type in the search box smooth 91 FM Lagos and we will be right there. You can also leave a comment there as well. Our first story starts takes on from Daily Times newspaper. 2019 polls. We will not fail. We'll give Nigerians excuses. We will not do that. That's what the INEC chairman says. And the details of this story today. The INEC chairman assuring Nigerians that the 2019 elections will be rancor-free and enumerating some steps they've taken to make sure this happens, saying that first of all, a point to note, he said the continuous voter registration made it possible for a lot of voters, 14.5 million more Nigerians to be added to the already existing register of about 70 million, bringing it to a total of about 84.2 million, he says. I mean, take us through the story, looking at the exercises, the steps, the eradication of incident forms as some points to note.
Yeah, I mean, it covers quite a bit, and it's good. Look, he makes all the right sound in the assembly at the legislature as to the funding required for it. I really do hope they get all the funding. He mentioned and he highlights and I'll just paraphrase him. He said to achieve our goal, he's called on all stakeholders: governments, election administrators, security agencies, civil society groups, and the space are from the do-or-die mentality of politicians, voted by, I mean, it's something I highlight. There's a lack of internal democracy from those who are vying on political on democratic platforms. He mentions incendiary speech, security, and then the lack of consequence for electoral offenders, and that's the biggest thing, because there's a lack of consequence for bad behavior. People generally go on to do what it is that they've done. He touches on the numbers of voters. He says through the continuous voter registration exercise, they've added 14.5 million voters to the register, to the existing 17 million we already have, which should bring it up to, the paper says 84.2, but by my math, that should be 84.5.
Clearly.
So I hope they're not keeping that, remaining 0.34.
That's Jara.
So, anyways, then he talks about doesn't pick up a card. They've improved on that by having a form where you then put your thumbprint and you write your number. So if at least you're in the DB, they can scan that thumbprint, match it with the number, and sort of validate you back in and say that this is a valid vote, as opposed to skipping that, because the card reader, machines can fail, the card can go bad. We all know. I mean, sometimes the card carries a chip on it. It can fail.
Malfunction. Yes.
It can malfunction. The device can malfunction, but they still will capture. So the form will capture your biometric manually, and then they'll check it back in to be sure that you actually on the register, as opposed to just being allowed to vote. So I mean, a lot of useful information here, and yes, he's absolutely right. Everyone needs to pay that. It's not just on INEC.
Thank you very much, Tunde, for that one. From ThisDay newspaper, we'll have this headline: Federal government's why $2.7 billion railway concession talks with GE stalled. So the Minister of Transportation, Mr. Rotimi Amechi, clarifying why the federal government, clarifying the reports really we saw in the papers yesterday, talking about GE. People were skeptical. The reports actually had it that GE pulled out of the deal, but he said that there was no deal signed in the first place, that GE did not sign any agreements with the federal government that on the planned $2.7 billion deal to concession and rehabilitate Nigeria's narrow gauge railway. What are your thoughts, Nwaji, on this?
Well, I think context is always important when you look at these kind of stories, and oftentimes it's always advisable that everybody does their own research and ask a lot of questions regarding these situations.
Why should the federal government have provided a guarantee to GE? Because if they do it for one company, then this is something that will then be sort of demanded for all the other companies. I'm just trying to understand why that's important.
Historical precedents. You can go back 30, 40 years. There was a project in the Osborne Railway back in the 70s, Osborne Development Area, that was actually meant to be a main bridge transportation hub infrastructure. And it was something in the ballpark then of around $600 million. And then when you commit and agree to such agreements, and you have foreign investors and you have foreign companies, they have to put certain funds in place. And then one successive takeover of a government or something of that nature, and then before you know it, somebody says, oh, I don't want to do this contract anymore. And then people are looking at their exposure like, okay, I'm sorry, but we've committed serious funds. And then and Nigerian government was taken to court, and the company won. I can't remember, I think it was an Italian company back then.
Okay.
So when you now begin to look at historical precedents of these things happening, when you go into these concession joint venture agreements with multinational companies.
The Commission now has announced that they will be probing the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, NBC, over the alleged misapplication of 2.5 billion naira meant for the digital switchover. Tunde, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, misapplication. If you read the story, I mean, it's right there. It's as clear as day. You know, especially with the way the funds are moved around. But I mean, I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, so this is the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, and it's not the first time. They're no stranger to controversy and allegations of fraud. Remember when we said we're switching broadcasting from analog to digital, and our TV signals became a lot less clear. You know, I mean, when we're analog, it was clear. Then suddenly with digital, and everything was blurry, and I'm like, okay. Then it was from then, you know, the all sorts of allegations of fraud, and it's reflective or it's an indication of all our parastatals and MDAs, unfortunately. Now, the bit that confuses me about this story is why NBC is responsible for migrating the telephone lines from analog to digital platforms. I really don't understand how it's within their purview. Someone, you know, out there knows this. I'd really like to know, find out and validate this ahead of time. I find it odd. We know Nitel is defunct, but
yes.
I mean that entity has been bought over, and you know it's been run by certain it's been run by Intel. So I don't know. I don't understand what the NBC's role in this is, unless it was a scam from day one, which may explain the brazen way the funds were just misappropriated. The funds, first of all, there's a gap in due diligence, according to the story, because there should be a laid-down procedure for public procurement and engaging a vendor. The story claims that didn't happen. That's the first thing. Then funds were released and summarily, shared into individual people's accounts. That's very odd. Into the managing director's account and into the chairman's account. These are all traceable, right? So it's odd. People only do this personal accounts.
Personal accounts.
Not the entire amount, but portions of it. So people only do this when only this brazen when things go really way up and high and feel that they have some sort of cover, or this is you understand now. This is what it is. You get so it's quite shocking, but ICP is in it. I hope that the more you steal, the better you get treated. So let's see where it goes.
That's why you go for the money.
Our next story is now from the Punch newspaper. Coalition protests EU's planned ban on palm oil. So coalition of all farmers under the aegis of Farmers Unite is what they call themselves. On Tuesday, they protested what they described as discriminatory campaign and trade policy by the European Union against the producers of palm oil. They call this a threat to the future livelihoods of tens of millions of small farmers in developed countries and developed nations. It says the campaign is based on junk science, is what they said, deceit and falsehoods. Ms. Ireti, what are your thoughts on this? Because palm oil, we know, is very rich in vitamins, in very useful nutrients that Nigerians especially love and produce.
It can also be quite bad for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we know that?
It can also be quite bad for you, but that doesn't mean I don't
It's in
like
so
it.
many things. Is it palm oil from here they're banning or globally?
Well, this is it. So that doesn't mean I don't like palm oil. I think for me, moi palm oil, moi cooked with palm oil is just the business. If you cook it with Oro, it's cheap.
Yeah,
as far as I'm
90% of all
concerned.
products contain palm oil.
Yeah.
From soap
So
to all
most
sorts
of
things.
what we have in supermarkets, you name it, 50% has palm oil in it. So you wonder why they're banning it. Now let's talk. So this is really not so much about palm oil for me. That's how I looked at this story. This is very much about what happens when the West starts to dictate. So they've gotten to a point of development, which we are still trying to get to. And because they've reached that point of development, they are now saying, oh, by the way, on our way to development euphoria, okay, we made certain mistakes which we've now learned from. All right. So now you Africans and you Malaysians and, you know, Honduras and all those Mexico and all those other places that make, you know, all you developing countries that wants to get to the same development euphoria that we're at, stop doing. Don't do what we did, even though we've made money from it. That's really what this story is about, because they're talking deforestation and, you know, basically because, of course, yes, palm oil trees, once they get too high, once they've been used, they do get, you know, they get killed by pesticides and they get cut down, etc., etc. But again, this is the livelihood. This is the livelihood of many, many people. And I know I have a friend who deals in palm oil. That's his livelihood. And I dare say how many people, even my Christmas present.
My parents, my grandparents.
There you go. There you go. So how dare you say to us that we shouldn't be doing this? However, what you should do, and I think this is the...
Thank you very much for that. Now let's move on to our next story. This one is in from the New Telegraph. We're still going to talk about 2019. And Nwaji, I'm coming to you for this one. Lagos PDP wants INEC to prosecute Sanwo-Olu and disqualify the APC. They're saying that there is a rule which a number of public broadcast and mass media organizations are very well aware of this, and the political parties are as well, that you aren't supposed to start campaigning till a certain point. For us, it's next week. It's the 17th of November. And yet they're saying, well, by the Vice President going with Governor Akinwumi Ambode under the guise of the Trader Money Initiative, and then introducing Sanwo-Olu in every market they go to, as well as handing out flyers, posters with his name. And we've all seen in Lagos the posters everywhere in Lagos with Sanwo-Olu's name, allegedly put up by people saying, you know, congratulations for the primaries that happened a while ago. PDP are saying, well, you're clearly flouting the rules, and we will not be, I think they say, rigged technically out of the election. What are your thoughts on this?
Boo-hoo, PDP. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, why do you say that? Because rules are rules. So why is it
they're
okay?
not violating the rules.
They're not?
They're not. For two reasons.
Okay.
Rules.
Okay, I'm listening.
Rules being is that any single campaign material, unless specifically and explicitly endorsed by the candidate, does not necessarily mean that they're campaigning. So a lot of the flyers that you're seeing is provided and supplied by the individuals that they call, I'm not going to say
allegedly,
their name,
yeah.
Supporters.
Allegedly.
by this
Supporters Club.
Supporters Club.
Proxy.
And if you cannot explicitly connect that supporters club to the candidate, then you can. Then he can easily say, "Well, I have nothing to do with this. This is just people who like me, who just want to promote me.
They love me.
They love me, man. Everybody loves me.
Love
everybody.
me.
All right. So
Okay.
Today's your fault. All right. Then secondly, regarding going out with the vice president and all these things, it's party business. It's party politics. You are the incumbent ruling party within the state, so you can go to the markets and engage and do whatever, and you can insinuate that, look, come this particular time, this is the individual that we're going to go for. Here is the incumbent governor that's going to be moving out. We've held our primary elections. We are very happy and we're very good to go. And you can insinuate things all day long. I mean, for crying out loud, this thing happens all the time.
Yes, but apparently not with the other political parties, and it
Nobody's stopping them.
But hang on,
They've not got
that's
any
the thing.
friends.
I think that's a strong assumption.
Maybe they don't have
that
any
they're not
friends,
being
Folu.
stopped exactly, because to say that other people don't have friends and other people couldn't do the same
I'm
thing.
saying maybe they don't have friends.
No,
Okay,
Folu.
but let's move on for time reasons. Because really, for time reasons.
Yeah, but-
Our next story is now from ThisDay newspaper. Ganduje slams 3 billion naira suit against daily Nigerian publisher. Kano State Governor Dr. Abdullahi Umar Ganduje, which a lot of our listeners have affectionately named Ganju Dollar, I believe, has instituted a 3 billion naira suit in a Kano court against Mr. Jafar for defamation, libel, slander, and they're asking for quite a few things other than 3 billion naira compensation. They are saying that there should be a perpetual injunction, that's forever, restraining the defendants from publishing said defamatory story or sharing the said doctored clips. They also want him to publish a public apology. And I mean, they're saying that this unqualified, they're calling it an outright and unqualified imputation of theft, fraud, corruption, and dishonesty, which is slanderous, libelous, injurious, and wrongful.
I know, right? Hilarious, right? Okay, so my first response to this is, you know.
Okay, so you and Nwaji are drinking the same coffee.
Yes,
we are.
yes,
Boo,
we are.
boo,
Boo, boo, Ganduje, right? So, look, the long and short of it is, again, I have to say, somebody did fantastic journalistic work. They did it. It was investigative. They had the evidence. They gave evidence to the House, remember? They went to the House committee. They gave evidence. They said, look, we're willing to submit all our
Absolutely.
videos. If you
The videos
believe
have been
the
verified.
videos have been verified both locally and internationally. So now we have baby Ganduje wanting to cry wolf, sir.
It's Gandola, they call it.
That's the one. You
Everyone has
can't.
their different versions.
Yes,
We've
yeah.
had all sorts.
You cannot. I mean, look, this is bullying, and this is when our leaders are drunk on impunity, which is something that Nwaji was saying earlier on. They're drunk on impunity. Ideally, he should be embarrassed, not suing. He's suing this paper for 3 billion. And what's incredible, this is a tiny little newspaper, you know. I'm just so excited by the word that Jafar did. So he wants to sue them for 3 billion, knowing full well it will destroy them. I say to
you want to
Nigerians,
sue the
the
journalists
journalists
specifically.
Yes. And I say to Nigerians, if we allow this to happen, forget your PVCs.
All right, thank you very much for that. Still a few more messages coming in. IK taking a ejection to Nwaji's earlier statement, saying, if what you've described isn't campaigning, then today is not Friday. It's one line. We also have Shego. We've also got Shego who says, PDP do not like trader money because it involves giving people money directly. In their ruling days, they allegedly gave money only to traditional rulers and the upper class folks. So they're a bit upset with that. Anyways, let's move on now and talk about more money. Speaking of governors and the amount of money that they have legally at their disposal, from the Punch newspapers, this next one, Ms. Ireti, I'm going to stay with you for this. The governors earn over 600,000 naira, not 500,000 naira, according to an investigation. And this is contrary to the claim made by Governor Kaide Fayemi that governors in Nigeria earn just $500,000 naira, a month. Official findings have put their statutory earnings, including some of their allowances, at 648,580 naira. But not only is that their basic hardship and constituency allowance, but it then has several other components in there as well. Other allowances of the governors that are not part of their monthly emoluments are 10% leave allowance, which amounts to 222,000 approximately per annum. Should a governor desire, he's entitled to a 400% motor vehicle loan allowance, which amounts to about 8.8 million naira. Also, when the governor's tenure is complete, he's entitled to 300% severance allowance. That's another 6.6 approximately million. This is apart from what is provided by each state as pension and gratuity, and also those allowances that are not monetized, which means that the state will still make full provision for such items to the taste of the governor. Motor vehicle fueling, maintenance, special assistant, personal assistant, domestic staff, entertainment, utilities, security. I mean,
Girlfriend
all of this.
assistants.
And it goes on to then talk about the president's breakdown, the vice presidents, those in the House, the reps. The reps are earning, let's see, about 7 point something in here. There's huge amounts of money right on the back of the governor saying we can't pay 30,000.
Well, Kaide Fayemi, really, he shouldn't start now. He really shouldn't start now, because we just gave him, or at least the people of his state just gave him a second chance, because really he wasn't very nice to them the first time round. So he needs to calm down. And basically was comparing his salary to the professor's salary. But very quickly, honestly, this is what we need to know. Again, going back to PVC election period. So governors, 7.7 million. That's what they're supposed to be earning. President, 14 million. VP, 12 million. Senator, 20 million. House of Rep, who should be called congressman, not honorable, 17 million. Ministers, 14.7 million. And guess what? This is the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Their aides also earn 14 million. It's disgraceful. So we are voting, Lagos. We are voting, ladies and gentlemen. This is what you need to bear in mind. Now, that governor that lives near you, that president, that House of Rep person, if he's only on 14 million and 7.5 million, how is he affording all his girlfriends, all the...
that we don't know about,
Thank
legally
you.
speaking. So, for
and all
time
those
reasons,
houses in Dubai, etc., etc.
But I do advise our listeners, do go over to the Punch newspaper. It's got a fantastic breakdown. And this was a document from the remuneration package of the obtained from the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, and it was obtained by their correspondent in Abuja. So the Punch newspaper has got full details of that story. A fascinating read. Up next from the Guardian newspaper, Tunde, let me come to you for this one. The the International Court of Justice has begun probes in general of claims in the course of investigations, which began before another bloody clash 2 weeks ago in Abuja. Your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, so when the last round of clashes between the Shiites and the states, that's the only way I can describe it, but the military happened, I was out of town, and I had the opportunity to sort of look at it from, a removed distance, and I just like, Nigeria, oh my Nigeria, I just, it's funny. Now, the IMN, which is the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, or as they're commonly described, the Shiites, claim that 53 persons were felled or killed during that latest clash, and they've invited the International Court of Justice. And they have every right to do so, because if you look at it, separately and dispassionately, it will look like, it's typically what people describe as it's a crime against, I don't want to call it a war crime because we're not at war, but it's symptomatic, and it's the kind of outcome that happens where the state just kills members of the states. I know it's a very touchy topic because groups I was in, you could clearly see that people were divided. Some said the military had every right to do it.
Yes, because they were transporting weapons.
They were transporting weapons. Others said they don't. My opinion, and since I'm here to share my opinion is that at no point should the military of any state open fire on its people. That's my opinion. People may have different views, or because they're transporting arms. If I understand we're not in the West, so you sort of will color that and say, okay, this is why they reacted in a certain way. But professional militaries will take a bullet for their people, not the other way around. That's the way it's done, right? But we're not in the West, so there are a bunch of other things. Now they mentioned that the ICG came to look at the state of Al-Zaki. I remember Lai Mohammed saying that they spend #1 million to feed him every day. I think that's particularly embarrassing.
Ridiculous.
It's far from it. I keep asking, why do they hold this man, right? Why do they hold this man? The spokesperson, or the person who is leading in Zakzaki's absence, has said that they're never going to take up arms, which is the question I ask. There's been no instance of them taking up arms. They're not like Boko Haram. So aren't we making the situation worse? Where is the common sense?
Well, we will wait for the full result of that to come out. But we've got this final story in from ThisDay newspaper. The federal government has disclosed its intention to purge the habit of open defecation that is rampant in many parts of the country, and I don't know if it's a feel-good, hopeful story or a sad one, if that is by 2025 that we're hoping that this practice will end across the nation.
I like that you use the word purge.
I'm sorry. Wow, Valentine. Wow.
It's a Friday.
It's a brown stuff story.
What I don't understand is why it's going to take 6 years to actually stop people from purging themselves.
Okay, well, let's look at the reality that we don't enforce rules very well, and this is a habit that's been going on for decades already.
Yes, so I'm just confused by the timeline.
If it's going on for decades, how long does it take for someone to get out of a habit that they've been doing for most of their life?
Maybe provide more public toilets.
Well, which is true. I mean, there are comparisons of what they did in India, where they built like multiple latrines and everything else, and maybe that will take time. But I just think that for something that is actually defecating your environment, like, excuse me,
and killing people,
is something you should move a lot faster on in 6 years. That's just my opinion on it.
It's simple social science.
Very
it's
simple.
like littering. If they realize if you don't put a place where people just throw trash
They're gonna
over
throw it all over the place.
over a limited period of distance, people will litter. If they don't have enough public toilets, people will litter. Let's think about how we do things.
So start building. That's why I'm confused by the time.
Get building, people. We need more toilets. And to round up, we've got several messages coming in. This one is in from Govs, who says, Sanwo-Olu supporters club constantly block Mobolaji Bank Anthony, reducing it by 1 lane. I think that is irresponsible. While Cruz says, Gandola is suing seriously. Hey, I think we need to borrow some Asian justice practices. I raise my eyebrows at that. Joseph from let's see, we've got this one. Max Zoring sends in this one, talking about, do you know that all House of Rep members necessarily have girlfriends? Please, let's stick to facts. Let's be careful. While Soji says, please ask the people of Zaria if the Zazaki goons don't bear arms. Very interesting. Thank you very much for that. And up on Twitter, we've got Mr. G question this one.
He says, I like Ganduje. He's pretty audacious with his dealings. 3 billion naira lawsuits. Carry on, Ganduje. You are innocent until proven guilty in a competent court of law. I only hope the Federal High Court in Kano will be competent enough and not biased.
And final one from J. Lu, who says, let's be real. Lagos APC has been cheating. In a decent country, these things won't happen. Sanwo-Olu has had posters all over the state for weeks. Come on.
And that's it.
Is
Lagos.
it that we don't like his face or something? Are you trying to say he's not handsome?
He's not really.
I didn't say that.
All right, so we'll have to talk about sports in 15 minutes. Thank you so very much for joining us, and special thanks to our analysts.
Yes, please find them online. You've got big coasters, Tunde Okufi, CCOK Lagos is chuckling in the corner. That's her handle, Miss Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, and you've got Nwaji, who is the corporate MC with a K.
You mean he's not as good looking as my
Have
Friday
you seen his
husband?
poses?
Leave my
Very off.
I know Jide. That's how Jide